My name is Eva Dublon. In 1939, the U.S. sent me back. I was murdered in Auschwitz. Hey, it's Lucas Grobot, and you're listening to Weaver and Loom. For the last week or so, we have been talking about gates, we have been talking about walls, and we've been talking about bridges, about burning our bridges, building our walls, and defending our gates. Really talking about personal boundaries that we have in our lives, in our communities, in our brands, the interior culture. What is the cultural constitution of the organization that we lead or that we're a part of? And today we're going to be telling a story of where those gates may have failed, where there actually wasn't the proper defending of the moral fabric of the city, which caused a massive failure on the part of three separate nations at the same time, just before World War II was starting in 1939. And the story is of the MS St. Louis. The MS St. Louis was an ocean liner that sailed from Germany on May 13th, 1939, under the command of Captain Gustav Schroeder. This ocean liner was carrying 937 Jewish refugees. There are some who weren't Jewish, but the majority of them were Jewish refugees fleeing Germany 4 months before the war began in World War II to find safe haven in Havana, Cuba. All the refugees, all the Jews on board the MS St. Louis had bought legal visas to Havana. And upon their arrival in Havana at 4 a.m. on May 27th, they were deeply disappointed to find out that just a few days earlier, Havana had changed their immigration laws, saying that they were restricted entry to all foreigners except U.S. citizens, requiring a bond of $500 and authorization by Cubans' secretaries of state and labor. Permits and visas issued before May 5th were invalid retroactively. None of the passengers were aware that the Cuban government had retroactively invalidated their landing permits. So here's a ship of 937 Jewish refugees fleeing Hitler before the greatest war of all time was about to begin. They get to Havana, finally find their safe haven, and they are rejected at the gates of that city. Well, Captain Schroeder was not going to give up. He thought, well, we're going to go up to the USA, America, and we're going to land in Florida, and we're going to get these people and find safe haven there. Well, unfortunately, Cordell Hull, the Secretary of State, advised President Roosevelt not to accept the Jews. But Captain Schroeder was so committed to doing right, to doing good, to doing the right thing in saving these Jews that he was even willing to shipwreck his boat on the shores of America that the Jews would be able to escape. But the U.S. Coast Guard prevented this. So as Captain Schroeder navigated the MS St. Louis up the coast of America, he reached out to Canada and he asked Canada if they would provide safe haven for these Jews. Now, there's many human activists and clergy in Canada that pressed for Canada to allow safe entry for these refugees. But William Lloyd Mackenzie King, the Prime Minister, was advised by the immigration officer, Frederick Blair, to not let them in because Blair believed and was hostile to Jewish immigration. So what happened? Again, these 900 immigrants, refugees, were turned away. Finally, Captain Schroeder gave up hope. He took the ship back to Europe, and a few hundred were able to find safe haven in Britain, but then about 600, to be precise, 620 of the St. Louis passengers of the 937 had to go back to continental Europe. Some of them went to Belgium, some of them went to France, to the Netherlands. And of those 600, they did a trace and traced every name. And they found out that 254 of those Jewish refugees who were knocking on the doors of Havana, on America, and on Canada, 254 of those went to Auschwitz and were killed in the gas chamber with 1 million other Jews. Now, this is a sobering story to think that, the name of Eva Dublon, you can go online and you can find an image of her, and she is a young girl who is on this boat going to Havana, going to America, going to Canada as a refugee, as she and her family fled for their lives from Hitler, from the Nazis. But the gates failed in these three countries. The gates failed. Now, America and Canada, they have both issued formal apologies to the Jewish people for this incident. But yet, 254 of those who returned, who were sent away from America, ended up dying in concentration camps and labor camps. And we tell this story today to ask ourselves this question. It's really easy to point the finger, but I want you to ask yourself this question today. Who have you been keeping out that you should let in? Who in your life have you said no because they're of a certain race, or they're of a certain skin type, or if they're a certain background, saying, no, you are not safe. No, you can't come in. No, you cannot pass these gates. And there's actually walls, and you're actually rejecting the broken, the destitute, the needy, those who we have a responsibility as humanity to care for. Who have you been turning away at your gates that you should really bring in? So ask yourself that question today. Weaver Loom, it is about weaving our destiny. It is about taking responsibility for our life. It is about realizing that we have the ability to shape and impact the future. Weaver and Loom is part of a segment in the show of Own the Future. And so today, I want you to think about how you can let a stranger into your life today, how you can make space at your table to help someone in need today in a big way or in a small way. Thank you for listening to Weaver and Loom. And please, if you have any questions that you would love answered here, whether it's about this episode or any of the previous episodes, you can go to my website, lucasgrobot.com. The link is in the show notes, and you can click the appropriate button and ask me a question. I would love to hear from you, and I would love to answer your question. And as always, if you found this story meaningful and impactful for you, please share this with a friend. I'm Lucas Grobot, and this is Weaver and Loom, where destiny